Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Surbhi Singla, and I secured All India rank 75 this year. And I'll be sharing my strategy in as much detail as possible so that I can, whatever you can relate to from my strategy, you may adopt. And if any doubts, I can answer those as well. Uh, so this was my fourth attempt. A brief background, I come from a small city called Fagwara in Punjab, and I then studied in the same city till class 12th. Then I did my graduation in chemical engineering from IIT Delhi. I graduated in 2017, and I've been preparing for civil services since then. Uh, so first of all, I'll share about my marks over the years. So in my first attempt, I qualified prelims, but I could not qualify mains. Then my second attempt, I failed prelims. So I could not even qualify prelims. Then third and fourth attempts, I qualified prelims, wrote mains, and fourth attempt was my first interview, and I secured a rank this time. So why it took me so long to clear the exam, I think, was because initially I did not plan my preparation very well. I somehow took a lot of phases of the preparation casually. So my optional subject was mathematics, and this was one main reason why I was failing to clear mains continuously. I was scoring low marks in mathematics. So I'll also share how I changed my strategy for mathematics over the years and how I balanced my time between GS and mathematics. So in my first attempt, I had not even completed the syllabus of mathematics before prelims. So between prelims to mains was the time I did actually prepare for mathematics. That time was insufficient. So first attempt, I was not expecting to qualify mains. So after the first attempt, I gave a lot of time to mathematics. I could not balance mathematics with GS, and I think I studied maths till 15 days before prelims, and that was one reason why I could not qualify prelims in the second attempt. Then third attempt, between the third and the second attempt, I gave a lot of time to mathematics, and in my view, I had prepared mathematics sufficiently, and I was expecting to get to qualify mains and get a rank in the third attempt. So the third attempt was, I think, my first serious attempt at mains. And when in that attempt, when I failed mains, was when I actually really did rethink about my main strategy. And then this was the fourth time. So this was the brief background. So my marks in this attempt, I scored 123 marks in essay. In GS 1, 2, 3, 4, I scored 408 combined. Within this, I think ethics was my major strong suit. In the others, I scored average in GS. In ethics, I scored 117. And in mathematics, I scored 296 this year. This was a jump of 100 plus from my previous attempt when I scored 195 in mathematics. So now I'll come to my strategy. For strategy, the sources for prelims and mains were common for me throughout, static sources and current sources. So I'll first share the sources, and then I'll share how was my strategy different for prelims and mains beyond this. So within sources, firstly static sources. GS1 for art and culture, I followed Nitin Singhania and the art and culture NCRT of class 12th. Other than this, for ancient and medieval history, I followed the new NCRTs of 11th and 12th. Then for modern history, I followed Spectrum. For geography, I followed the NCRTs of class 11th and 12th. NCRTs I did not read for many subjects. I only read NCRTs for 2 subjects, which were geography and ancient and medieval history. Other than this, I did not read any NCRTs. So this was for geography. Coming to GS2, for polity, I read Lakshmikant. For other than this, I did not follow any static sources for international relations or for governance. I did not follow any static source. How I prepared these fringe topics, I'll come to a little later in this session. So then for GS3, for economy, I followed Mrunal. I did not attend the classes. I bought the PDFs of Nunal from the market and I read through those PDFs in entirety. For environment, I read Shankar IS's Green Book on environment. And for ethics, Vajiram notes were my base for ethics. I had taken coaching from Vajiram during my first attempt. So this was my base. Over and above this, I collected examples and definitions from various sources, sometimes from the newspapers, sometimes from some compilation in the market. During this attempt, I also read Mudit Jain sir's Decode Ethics book. So these were my sources for the static portion. For current portion, I read newspaper daily. I read the Hindu newspaper throughout all my 4 attempts. Other than this, I used to read daily current affairs. So I followed Insights IAS daily current affairs. I was doing this practice because I cleared prelims in my first attempt, as I said, but failed in my second attempt. So I also realized that during my second attempt, I had neglected GS throughout the year. I was focusing more on maths. I was not reading daily current affairs. I was reading the newspaper on and off. And in the end, last 2 months before prelims, I read the compilations, PT 365. I found that insufficient because when you read some compilation 2 months before prelims, you are not really able to recall it well before the exam. So prelims is also a lot about elimination strategy and intuition. When you're reading something consistently, your intuition becomes better at eliminating the wrong answer. When you're reading it just 2 months before the exam, you do tend to sometimes overthink on the question and then take the wrong answer in stress. So I realized that reading daily current affairs was essential for me to stay in touch with what is happening in the news and in the country. So when you read daily current affairs, you realize that coaching institutes make the task easier for you. For example, when you're reading the newspaper, there's an article on federalism or there's a tussle between 2 states. They will cover what is happening and they'll cover some brief background of the issue. But when you read any coaching institute's daily current affairs, you'll realize that they also cover the backstory of the issue. They'll tell you which article of the constitution deals with federalism, what are the committees that have given their recommendations on federalism, what are the recommendations of those committees, and what were other issues on or around federalism in the recent past. So when this analysis you're reading on a daily basis, you tend to internalize it better both for prelims and mains. So this was one reason I was spending so much time on current affairs. I was reading the newspaper, I was following a daily current affairs website, and then I was following monthly compilations of Vision Eyes in the end to revise the material. So these were my sources for current. Also, I was following Drishti IAS's material on and off. So what I was doing was, say there is a topic called SAG. I'll also come to this in a little detail in the later part of my session. So this is an important theme. In mains, you realize that they ask one question on, say, SAGs or pressure groups or NGOs in paper 2 every year. So this is a very important theme for mains. And when you see the syllabus of mains, you prepare notes theme-wise. So for current affairs, whenever there was something which was in news for some time and was an important topic, I would just search SAG's Drishti IAS. So their compilation is a little comprehensive in the sense that they'll act as a one-stop source for your current affairs and they'll make the preparation easier for you. So they'll give some data on SAGs, how many SAGs exist currently in the country, what are the government schemes for financial inclusion, or what are the government schemes to promote SAGs. So all of this data became easier for me by referring to sources like Drishti. I also used RSTV debates for such comprehensive coverage. So these were 2-3 sources which cover a topic comprehensively, and to cut short my time for making notes, I used sources like these. So these were my sources. Now coming to the strategy for prelims and mains. Now these sources are the same for both prelims and mains. How you use these sources is what is different for prelims and for mains. For prelims, after reading through these sources, you need to practice MCQs. That you can do one through daily quizzes on some coaching materials websites, and the other is through practicing mock test papers. So I used to solve some 40 to 50 mock papers for prelims. every year. How I did this was, I used to solve Vision's prelims test series completely in my first and second attempts, because in those attempts I was a beginner. So in the later two attempts, I did not solve them completely. I only solved the full-length test papers. Other than this, I enrolled for SFG or Forum IS. Through that, I was able to inculcate some discipline in my preparation. So I think that's a problem with all of us. We sometimes tend to delay writing tests. We keep procrastinating, and in the end month, we write a lot of tests. So this was happening with me as well. So to inculcate discipline, I enrolled for Forum's SFG program. They conduct a test at 7 a.m. in the morning, and it's compulsory to write a test in that time slot only. So that helped inculcate discipline. So in the third and fourth attempt, I joined SFG. I was solving 1 hour mock test papers through this daily. Other than this, I solved the full-length test papers only of Vision IS and some open test papers of Forum, of some other institutes. So all in all, I was solving some 40 to 50 test papers for prelims every year. Now, solving test papers within 2 hours is one thing. How do we analyze these papers? There is a very frequent question that analyzing these papers takes a lot of time. We tend to take sometimes 4 to 5 hours to analyze. I was taking around 4 to 5 hours to analyze these papers, but I was giving that time to these papers because for me, it was always rewarding. So what I identified was that coaching institutes generally do tend to cover the important themes and the previous year's questions in detail in their mock test papers, and these themes tend to get repeated over the years, previous year questions, themes, and some important themes. So when you analyze the solutions of these mock test papers, there are 3 things that happen. Number 1, you're able to cover important previous year's questions and important themes that are often repeated in prelims and mains. Number 2, you identify your weak areas. So for prelims, in my initial attempts, what I was doing was, say for polity, I'll revise Lakshmikant once, and then I solve the sectional test of polity. And through this sectional test, I identify which is my weak area. So if after solving the, if after revising Lakshmikant, I'm able to secure some 120 marks or 130 marks in a sectional paper, I'm good with polity. If I'm scoring low marks in a sectional paper, so I was scoring low marks in history sectional papers consistently. So I realized that history was one subject where I needed more effort. So based on this continuous analysis of which were my weak areas, through revising and then giving a sectional test after revising, I was focusing more on the weak areas. So this is the second objective. These mock test papers help you identify your weak areas. So the comprehensive mock test papers in the end, they help you identify whether you're more weak in current affairs or in some static subject. Thirdly, they help refine your elimination skills. So prelims is about 2 things. One is knowledge and one is elimination skills. So in the paper, you will generally not know the answer to all the questions, but most of us tend to attempt 90 plus questions in every attempt. I used to attempt around 96, 97 questions in every attempt. So for the remaining questions which you do not know the answer to, whether you should attempt the question or skip the question, that analysis you will do for yourself by solving the more and more mock test papers. So when I solve the mock test papers, I used to analyze if there is a question for which I am able to eliminate 2 options and I am confused between the remaining 2 options. If I go with my intuition, am I scoring net positive or net negative marks? So this way I was able to identify whether my intuition is working in the right direction or not. And also elimination skills, like if there are 4 options, a lot of times 2 options contradict each other. Say if option A is correct, option D has to be false. So these are a lot of elimination skills and strategies that you develop through solving more and more mock test papers. So these were the 3 aims that I was trying to achieve through solving these mock test papers. So this was the strategy for prelims: revising static sources, being very thorough with current affairs, reading daily current affairs along with the newspaper and monthly compilations, and then solving more and more mock test papers in the end. And this solving I would concentrate in the last 2 to 3 months of my preparation. So I was revising my sources throughout the year, but I would start solving papers more in the last 2 to 3 months. So also there is this question about when should we shift more away from mains towards prelims completely. So in my first 2 attempts, I shifted, so the second attempt I could not clear prelims, so that is an aberration. In the first attempt, the 3 months before prelims, I completely closed all mains notes and I was only focusing on prelims. Third and fourth attempt, since I was more confident around prelims, some 50 days before prelims, I shifted completely towards prelims, revising from the perspective of prelims and solving more and more mock test papers, analyzing those papers, giving 4 to 5 hours, etc. So this was my strategy for prelims. Then coming to mains, again the static sources for mains were the same as were for prelims. From current affairs sources, my strategy for mains was to make notes theme-wise. So for mains, I will deal with 2 things. One is making notes and second is answer writing, and how I prepared keeping these 2 in mind and taking them forward simultaneously. So for mains, in my first attempt, I had done very little answer writing practice. So I scored low marks in all the GS papers. And I realized that even though I had qualified prelims, qualifying prelims is a sign that you have sufficient command on the GS subjects. But even after that, I was not confident with writing answers. And I think that is a problem with most of us, that we always feel we are not yet equipped to write answers, and probably we need one more revision before we can jump to answer writing. So this was a concern for me. To move away from this, I started with daily answer writing. So I did not jump to 3-hour test papers suddenly. I first wrote 2 to 3 answers daily. So I followed IS Baba's TLP initiative. It's a free initiative. They post 5 answers daily. I followed their TLP initiative for some 1 to 1.5 years. I would write 3 to 4 answers daily on their website. So then after writing, and initially I was taking some 20 to 25 minutes to write one answer, and I was giving it that time because in that moment I was focusing more on developing quality for my answers. So while I was writing these answers, after 4 to 5 months, I realized that the themes on which questions are asked are very repetitive. So this is the second point that I'm coming to, how to make notes for mains. So I pasted GS 1, 2, 3, 4 main syllabus in front of my desk, and I thoroughly ingrained each and every keyword of main syllabus. So for instance, GS1, the first topic is art, architecture in ancient and medieval. So you do not have to read the entire ancient and medieval portion for mains specifically. For mains, you have to focus more on art, architecture, and literature, because that is what the syllabus says. And these are the kind of questions that they are asking. They are not asking about countries, about a ruler's political setup or what they did. They are asking more around their temple architecture, their coins, their paintings, Bhakti Sufi movements, literature in Urdu, literature in Persian. So they are asking around the art and culture themes of these rulers. And there are certain hot topics, like Vijayanagar kingdom is a hot topic, Bhakti Sufi movement is a hot topic. So for mains, when you start preparing notes, before you start making notes, the first step is to identify what is it that you need to note and what should be your focus area. That analysis you do after you've understood the demand of the question, and that I did through understanding the previous year's question papers. So take 6 to 7 years of previous year's question papers, analyze them thoroughly, keep the GS syllabus in front of you, and then analyze. You realize, for instance, there's GS2. The first topic under the syllabus of GS2 is the constitution, its historical underpinnings, its evolution, its salient features. And the first and second question in every year's mains are generally around the constitution. Like this year, the first question was on constitutional morality, which is a salient feature of the constitution, which has evolved through recent judgments. Similarly, the second, there is one topic in mains around challenges to federalism. Every year there is a question on some finance commission recommendations or some challenge to federalism between center-state issue, fiscal devolution between center and states, the 73rd and 74th amendment. So you'll realize that mains is much more predictable as compared to prelims, because in every part, GS 1, 2, 3, 4, they have given some 14 to 15 lines on the syllabus, and they are exactly asking from that syllabus. So like if you analyze GS2, they've given four lines for international relations, bilateral relations between two countries, international organizations, India's diaspora and its importance, UN and its importance. So every year in international relations, either they'll ask about India and its relations with some other country, say like this year they asked about Africa. So some country which is in news, or some country which India has had good developments with in the past, a bilateral relationship question, one question on an international organization like Quad, SCO, AUKUS, one question on India's diaspora and its importance, the policies Indian government is pursuing for their diaspora, or what is the diaspora's contribution to India's economic growth or India's strategic diplomacy, etc. So when you make this analysis for yourself, then note making becomes very easy. Now all you have to do is that you internalize these keywords, and whenever you're reading some static source or the newspaper or current affairs magazines, you have federalism as a keyword in mind, you have SHGs as a keyword in mind, you have India-Japan as a keyword in mind. Whenever you read the newspaper or some current affairs, there's an article on India-Japan, they'll talk about the India-Japan trade figure. Make note of that figure. Make a note, international relations, bilateral issues, India-Japan. Make a note of the trade figure between the two countries. Economic relations, make a note of what is happening in the recent past. Some two initiatives India and Japan have recently started. So this way, keep the keywords of mains in mind and make notes based on those keywords. Like SHG is another keyword. Now every year they'll ask either about the economic impact of SHGs on the country, impact of SHGs on women empowerment, impact on financial inclusion. So if you've prepared the note on SHG in a manner that you've written down what are the schemes that government is implementing to promote SHGs, like the SHG bank linkage program, economic contribution of SHGs to the country, social contribution of SHGs, some data on the number of SHGs that are running, some good examples of SHGs, like there is the Kudumbashree movement by women in Kerala. So if you make notes in this way, most of the questions that you will come across in mains will be through your notes, or you will be able to link those that question with your notes and write value points. So for mains, what I did was initially, when I did a year of answer writing, I realized how predictable the questions in mains were, and that they were around limited themes, and those themes were coming directly from the keywords of the syllabus. So while writing these daily answers, I started adding value to those answers. I used to read other answers that were uploaded on the platform. I would take some good data points, some good examples from the answers written by other people and note them down. And then I started making theme-wise notes for every topic of mains, and I would add value addition points daily. So whenever I'm reading the current affairs, I make this a 1-hour exercise, and whatever is relevant for a specific theme of mains, I used to make notes on soft copy. I'll go to Evernote, I'll update my notes with this theme, and then I'll move forward. So I realized with this practice, when I was revising these notes, I was able to bring those points in my answers. So when the quality of my answers began to improve, I gathered more confidence in writing 3-hour test papers. So I would join some test series for mains in every attempt, but in my previous 3 attempts, I did not take those test series seriously. So a 3-hour test I would write in some 4 to 5 hours, and if I did not know the answer to a question, I would Google and write the answer to that question. So I was not writing those tests like tests. But in this attempt, what I changed was I took those tests very, very seriously. I focused on time management. I focused on revision of the notes that I had prepared in these previous years, and bring those points down in my answer. So we tend to read a lot, but since we do not practice answer writing, we are not able to bring that reading out in our notes. We are not able to write crisp answers. We are not able to recall points and examples in time in the paper. So if you analyze, there are 10 markers and 15 markers in the paper. So you get 7 minutes to write a 10 marker and 11 minutes to write a 15 marker. Within that time, you have to read the question, understand the demand of the question, recall some good examples, data points, and complete the answer with conclusion. That practice you'll be able to achieve for all 20 questions only when you've done sufficient answer writing practice. So this was my strategy, daily answer writing and then a test series. For my 4th attempt, what I did for maths as well as DS practice was, I joined two test series for JS in my fourth attempt. I joined forum test series to write 3-hour tests. So I was writing one 3-hour test every weekend between prelims and mains in this attempt. And for daily answer writing, what I did was I joined Vision test series. And what I did was I divided the 3-hour test paper in 3 slots of 1 hour. And I would complete these within 1 hour like a test every day. So every week I was able to complete 2 test papers of Vision and then submit them at the center. How I did this was, there are 20 questions. The first 10 questions are 10 markers, the next 10 questions are 15 markers. So I did this analysis for myself that when I begun the paper, especially for 10 markers, I was taking more time. The ideal time is 7 minutes, but I was not able to do that in 7 minutes. I was taking some 7.5 to 8 minutes initially to warm up, and then I was able to come back to the speed needed later on. So how I divided this was, the first 10 markers, I used to write them in 7 minutes. So 7.5 into 8, this was around 60 minutes. So first 60 minutes, my target was to complete the first 10 markers. Then I moved on to the 15 markers. I skipped 10 markers for the end. Now the next, my target was to write in around 11.5 minutes the next 7 answers of 15 marks. Then the next 15 markers, I tried to speed up and write them in around 10 minutes. Then I had some 9 to 10 minutes left. Within this time, I completed the last 10 markers. So I was taking some 5 minutes to write the last 10 markers. How I was doing this was, I was using more flowcharts and more diagrams in the last 10 markers and not writing them completely. So this strategy I was able to come to by practicing more and more and realizing for myself that I was taking more time to write the initial few questions. I was able to get back to speed in the final few questions. And then I also refined upon this strategy. For instance, you get 5 minutes before your paper in mains for every paper. So those 5 minutes I would take to identify which are the 3-4 questions that I know the least about. Those 3-4 questions I was dealing in the end. So these 10 markers that I was writing in the end in 5 minutes, and these 15 markers that I was writing in 10 minutes were the questions I knew least about. So this way I was able to complete all 20 questions in time. I was able to write some 14-15 quality answers and some 4 to 5 average answers. So time management for mains is also very important, which you will be able to make a blueprint of time management for yourself when you're writing tests in time, when you're doing sufficient answer writing practice. So this was about answer making, notes and time management for mains. For ethics, I used to score good marks in ethics throughout my attempts, in first attempt, second attempt as well as fourth. For ethics, what I did was I used Bajinam notes as my base. They had all the definitions for most of the keywords like emotional intelligence, etc. So they had keywords, they had some good examples. So they provided me a base to start with in ethics. After this, I would go through toppers' copies. I would identify how they are solving answers, how they are using examples to enrich their answers, how they are using personal life examples, examples of some good leaders who have shown integrity in ethics in the past. And so based on these analysis of these toppers' copies, I would then write my answers for ethics. And over the years, whatever good compilations I was getting in the market, I was using them selectively. This year I used Mudit Jain sir's Decode Ethics, and I found that book good enough to be used for ethics. So, I'll deal with 1 or 2 types in ethics. Like we see 3 types of questions generally. One is definition-based questions, one is quote-based questions, and one is case studies. So say there is a quote-based question, there is a quote by some famous leader. How I used to approach this quote was, initially I would introduce with some good introduction, a definition, or any other quote which would justify the above quote. In the body, I would divide the answer into 3 parts. In the first part, I would deal with the relevance of this quote for the leader. So why did the leader use that quote in that time? What was the relevance in that time? Secondly, how is that quote useful in the present time? Like, what is the relevance of this quote in present times for us? And then third step, how is the quote relevant for a bureaucrat, or how will I benefit from the quote or the idea behind the quote in my future profession as a bureaucrat? And then I would end on a very positive futuristic note for that quote. So this was my strategy for quote. For case studies, what I would do was I would divide the case study. There were a number of blueprints. One is you can do a stakeholder analysis. So I used to introduce my case studies with some fact. I used to read toppers copies. So Vishakha Yadav ma'am had scored, I think, around 160 marks in ethics 2 years ago. I read her test copies and I identified that she was always using a data point to introduce case studies. So for instance, if there's a case study on COVID, you can use a data point on how has COVID impacted the country, the number of deaths that have taken place, or the number of people affected. That used to form my introduction to establish a base on the importance of the case study being asked. Then I would do a stakeholder analysis, and then there were 3 to 4 approaches. One was to use a short-term, medium-term and a long-term approach to deal with the case study, about what steps I'll take in the short term, what steps I'll take in the medium term, and then in the long term. Another approach was to identify the major problems being asked and then address each problem simultaneously. For instance, there's a case study. One problem can be to convince people in the case study to do something. The second problem can be to rectify the institution such that these problems do not arise in the future. So I would identify 3 to 4 problems that were being asked or addressed in the case study. I would make a flowchart and address each problem specifically. So for convincing people, you can use tools of emotional intelligence, you can communicate with them, you can relate with them through examples. So along with this analysis, in the end, I was always focusing on rectifying the institution. For instance, if there is a case study that has arisen, there is corruption, or there is an allegation, or there is a protest, there will always be a problem in the institutional setup about why such case studies or why such problems arise. So if you give, in the end, a sustainable solution to rectify that institution in the long term so that such problems do not arise in the future, this will depict to the examiner your approach to not solve just one specific problem, but the larger issue behind that problem. So if you're able to show a larger vision, I think that is also rewarded in ethics. Also, so whenever I was writing my answers for ethics, I was using a natural approach as to what I would do as a bureaucrat or as an aware citizen in the situation. But those natural answers I was beautifying with keywords. So if you write communitarianism as a keyword to depict how you will solve conflict between two communities. So such keywords are also rewarded in ethics. So analyze toppers copies, see how they are writing, see what is being rewarded for them, and then based on that you can add value to your answers in ethics. For essay, I did not do anything, I did not read anything specifically. I generally read books in my free time. So whatever books I was reading, I generally read non-fiction. Any relevant example or any relevant quote or anything relevant that I used to find in those books, I used to make a note of that separately for my essay notes in Evernote. So this was my only strategy for essay, different from the GA strategy. Other than this was essay writing practice. I joined NextI's test series for essays, and I was writing those tests in time to analyze how my presentation is being rewarded, what are the changes that I need to make with the structure of my essay. So this was my strategy for essays broadly. So coming to maths, for maths, like I said, maths was my major pain point and was the major reason I was not able to clear mains in the last 2 attempts. So for maths, what I realized was that I was reading maths a lot. I was reading, so there was this 3-step approach to maths. First, I had joined IMS Coaching Institute for Mathematics. You can also take their notes from the market. I think they're comprehensive enough. So I followed IMS notes for mathematics mostly. In my first iteration, I read and revised and solved each and every question of these notes 2 times. After I had done this process, I made short notes of each topic in maths. So there are some 14 to 15 chapters in maths, and the notes for each of these chapters are very bulky, and it is not feasible to revise them some 6 to 8 times before your exam. So after I had done 2 to 3 iterations of revising and practicing each question of these notes, I made my own short notes for maths. So in these short notes, I wrote every relevant quote. I wrote the proof of some important quotes that were being repeatedly asked in previous year's questions, and then I solved and added one question of every type in those notes. So these were some 50 to 60 pages, concise notes for every chapter, and then these were my final notes that I was revising before every iteration and before every test. So I was able to revise these notes quickly, and now I was able to give more time to practicing maths, since I did not have to read those bulky notes again and again. So between my time, between prelims and mains this year, what I did was my notes, short notes were ready for every chapter in mathematics. What I did was I would revise these notes before every sectional test. Then I would give the test in the weekend. After the first month, when I had completed one iteration through 4 sectional tests, I also moved to daily problem solving for maths. So I also followed the strategy by listening to previous year's toppers in mathematics, that I would solve mock tests extensively for maths. So there are 8 questions, and you have to choose 5 questions from these 8 questions and solve them in 3 hours. So what I was doing was I was solving all these 8 questions by dividing them into 2-2-hour slots every day. So in 2 days I was able to complete one mock paper for maths. This way I solved 2 hours papers daily for maths, and in the time between prelims and mains I was able to solve some 40 plus mock test papers for maths. So this way I was able to do a lot of practice, uh, enhance my calculation efficiency. I was able to arrive at the right answers in time, and I was also able to identify my weak areas. So there are some chapters in which some subjects were consistently being false. For instance, there is a topic real analysis. Within this, I realized that sequences and series is one topic for which I am consistently not able to solve questions in my mock tests. So based on this identification, I was then also practicing questions from books. So I followed IMS notes for maths mostly, but I supplemented these notes with books wherever I identified were my weak areas. So within real analysis, I identified that sequences and series is a weak area. So I followed Malik and Arora book and solved examples of sequences and series from these notes. So similarly for 3D and a few other topics, I identified some specific weak areas and solved examples from books for these areas only, so that I give less time to revising and more time to practicing. For all notes, for all my topics in maths, I solved IMS notes, but for the 4 physics topics, I did not follow IMS notes, and I relied on books. So for statics and dynamics, I followed Krishna series books. I solved each and every question of these books, and after 2 to 3 iterations, made short notes, as I had explained. For the other 2 topics, fluid dynamics and mechanics, I did not solve them completely or rely on any specific source. I followed a reverse engineering strategy. I would see the previous year's questions being asked from these 2 topics, and I focused on solving the 10 markers for these topics only, so that the 15 markers I can skip for another optional question. So for these 2 topics, I only relied on solving the 10 markers in previous year's questions and seeing the theory of those 10 markers. So this way for maths, other than these 2 topics, I solved rest of the notes in entirety, and for these 2 topics, I relied more on PYQs. And then test solving for 2 hours every single day. So this was my strategy. I can move to the next part, which was mainly motivation, about how I kept on to this journey for 4 years. But if you have any questions about the strategy.
Ma'am, what about the language paper?
The language paper. For Hindi language paper, one day before the paper, I would read 2 to 3 essays from Hindi's 10th, from Hindi's grammar book in class 10th. Then selectively read muhavares and other grammar portion. So So this was a very, so I realized that if I'm able to, if I just go through the Hindi grammar book one day before the exam, I had Hindi till class 10, so I did have awareness about most of the subject. I just needed practice and I needed to recall it in time in the exam. So I followed, so one day before the exam I read the grammar book, and for English I did not read anything specifically, since when you're reading the Hindu newspaper and reading some books for English, I think you are able to solve most of the portion for English language. So that was it for language. So I'll now move to motivation, about how I was able to keep at this journey for till 4 attempts. So I think there are two parts to addressing how to stay motivated. One is this choice or this decision to continue to appear for civil services examination or to stay at your decision. And the second is, once you have decided to stay at your decision and to continue to pursue for civil services, how do you keep your motivation intact on a daily basis? So the first part, which is choosing or deciding to continue, I think is very personal to everyone. This should be tackled by asking yourself, why did you choose to pursue this journey in the first place? So for me personally, there were some experiences during my college time which depicted that job satisfaction for me would come better through civil services than through any other examination. Also, uh, whenever during this journey I question my decision to come to civil services, or whether it is worth giving the amount of time that I'm giving, I used to speak to some seniors who were my mentors during this process, who had already cleared this exam. So some words from them time to time helped me stay at this journey. So one thing that stayed with me and stuck me was, if you are questioning your decision, and say if you failed at the exam 1 or 2 times in prelims or in mains, and you're questioning about whether to keep pursuing it, ask yourself about where you want to see yourself 30 years from now. If this is the job that will give you satisfaction for the next 30 years of your life, and that you feel you'll be satisfied through the nature of this job, then 1 or 2 or 3 years right now will not matter as much. So that is a personal choice for you about whether to stay at this journey or not. The second part, which is, once you've decided that you want to stay at this journey and continue to pursue civil services, how do you keep your motivation intact? That part I can deal with better. So I stayed at home mostly for my preparation. I only came to Delhi for the 4 months between prelims and mains in my 4th attempt. So when I was at home, I would consistently see the sacrifices, the small sacrifices my parents were making for me on a daily basis. So my father would come home early from his, so he's self-employed, he had flexible working hours, so he would come home early, he would sit with me till late in the night whenever I was studying. My mother would not go anywhere, she would keep sitting with me whenever I was studying. My parents did not take a trip for the 4 years that I was at home. So all of these sacrifices were somewhere staying with me and helping me to stay at this journey, to justice to my parents and the lifestyle changes they were making for me. Secondly, also sometimes you tend to lose sight of the larger picture. You tend to lose sight of the larger things that life has to offer, and you tend to fixate at civil services too much and create self-doubt around yourself when you're consistently failing. I think that you should resolve. Number one, you should talk to people who you can trust. So I would always talk to my younger brother whenever I had a lot of self-doubt, and he would remind me about how whenever I had chosen to do something in life, I had given my best to it and I was able to come out of it. And this exam is just another test of that determination of yours. So talk to people who can motivate you, who can remind you of your abilities, your capabilities to deal with adversities in life, and help you stay motivated. You can also ask some trusted people to keep account on you. So I was sharing my timetable with my younger brother daily, and I asked him to take updates from me at the end of the day. So whenever I got distracted during my day, or I could not give enough time to self-study, I had to answer him at the end of the day, and I felt ashamed if I had studied less during the day, and that acted as a motivation to make this better the next day and make up for the lost time in the previous day. So if you're giving accountability to somebody who you can trust and who you admire, I think that will help you stay away from distractions and keep your focus at the exam. Thirdly, do some little things to unwind yourself in your daily life. So especially during my third and fourth attempts, I used to stay low for large phases, and I used to get distracted at times. So I developed some productive hobbies. So for instance, I developed a small garden in my balcony, and whenever I used to feel low, I used to just go out cycling and buy a new plant for my balcony. And nurturing that plant gave me some form of satisfaction and also some form of achievement. So whenever I was able to revive a dying plant, I felt a sort of achievement that I am able to do something good in life. So develop some productive hobbies that make you feel good about yourself. Unwind sometimes. Whenever I was extremely bored studying in my room, I used to go out, sit in some good cafe and study there for 3 to 4 hours. So make your UPSC reading interesting. Take small breaks at times and develop productive hobbies which make you feel good about yourself and also remind you of the larger picture and the larger goal of why you chose civil services. Next, having realized that motivation is important to keep you at the exam, it is not sufficient because motivation fluctuates on a daily basis. Sometimes you are extremely motivated and sometimes you are extremely demotivated. So I think you should not solely rely on motivation. You should complement your motivation with discipline. You have to internalize this fact that you will not be able to clear this exam without studying or without putting in the necessary hard work. Once you've internalized that, even on your low days, you will realize that you may not have the motivation to study, but for the sake of that discipline and for the sake of following the timetable that you have made for yourself, you will have to achieve your targets before you go to sleep. So complement your motivation with discipline so that you're able to pull off a few hours of study even in your low days and at times when you do not feel like studying. So this was about how I kept myself motivated. In the end, I'll just like to say that if you look at this exam, comprehensively, prelims, mains, interview, and if you see this from this perspective that there are 5 lakh people who appear for prelims and you will need to get a rank in top 100 to get your desired service, you will feel extremely intimidated by the mammoth target. So do not see this exam in terms of the number of people that appear and the rank that you want to get, rather see this through the marks that you want to achieve. So break your preparation down. See how many marks you need to get to qualify prelims, how many marks you need to get in each paper in mains to be able to so see what were the marks of rank 10 last year, rank 1 last year, rank 50 last year, rank 100, and make those marks your target. Do not make a rank your target because then it might seem intimidating that so many people around you are working hard and how will you be able to get through. But when you make marks your target, you realize that it is not very difficult to get these many marks in GS or these many marks in optional or these many marks in prelims. So when you fixate on those marks, you tend to not be intimidated by the competition around you and just keep working through your goals and your targets towards achieving your marks. Every time you move a step closer to your marks, you'll feel motivated and you'll feel you can also crack the exam, and that will motivate you further to achieve your desired marks. So I used to always stick a goal in front of me. For this attempt, I decided I need to score 300 plus in maths, 400 plus in GS, these many in essay, and I was only focusing on those marks. I did not focus on the rank that I get, because once you've achieved those marks, rank will come by itself and that will not intimidate you enough. So this was my message, that take this exam as a step-by-step process, focus on increasing your marks step by step, and do not get intimidated by the competition. Thank you.
अभी हम लोग को क्लासेस चल रहा है, उसके साथ कैसे इसको देखो मैम, अभी आंसर राइटिंग भी बताएंगे इतना सही से, इस चीज़ को थोड़ा
तो आप अपने लिए कुछ प्रायोरिटीज़ डिसाइड करिए। जैसे आपकी क्लासेस चल रही हैं, पर आपको पता है कि आप आंसर राइटिंग के बिना मेंस क्वालिफाई कर पाना मुश्किल है। रीडिंग आप थोड़ी कम भी करेंगे तो चलेगा, तो आप अपना दिन का फर्स्ट आवर आंसर राइटिंग को डेडिकेट कर सकते हैं। तो जितनी भी आपके सामने चीज़ें हैं, जीएस है, ऑप्शनल है, स्टैटिक है, करंट है, आंसर राइटिंग है, आप उसमें से प्रायोरिटाइज़ करिए। कोचिंग के बाद जितना आपके पास दिन में टाइम है, मान लीजिए 7 घंटे हैं, तो उसमें से प्रायोरिटाइज़ करो कि 1 घंटा मुझे आंसर राइटिंग को देना ही देना है, बाकी के जो 6 घंटे हैं उसमें से मैं अपने ऑप्शनल और जीएस के लिए टाइम डिवाइड करूँगा। तो जो भी टाइम है आपके पास एट प्रेजेंट, उसमें प्रायोरिटाइज़ कर लो कि क्या चीज़ नेसेसरी है, क्या चीज़ करनी है, ज़रूरी है, और क्या चीज़ निगलेक्ट की जा सकती है फॉर द टाइम बिंग। जी, तो जैसे मैंने स्टार्टिंग में बताया कि एनसीईआरटीज़ मैंने सिर्फ ज्योग्राफी के लिए और एंशिएंट एंड मेडिवल के लिए रीड करी थी। तो ज्योग्राफी के लिए मेरी ये अप्रोच थी कि पहली 2-3 रीडिंग्स मैंने एनसीईआरटीज़ वर्ड बाय वर्ड पढ़ी। उसके बाद जब मैंने प्रीवियस ईयर्स क्वेश्चन पेपर सॉल्व किए, टेस्ट पेपर सॉल्व किए, तो थोड़ा थोड़ा रियलाइज़ होने लगा कि इसमें क्या एरिया ज़्यादा इंपॉर्टेंट है और क्या एरियाज थोड़े कम हैं। जैसे जो रिवर्स वाले चैप्टर्स हैं, उसमें ग्लेशियर्स के नाम, रिवर्स का रूट, कंट्रीज़, पोर्शन ऑफ वाटर हर रिवर का, उससे क्वेश्चंस बहुत आए हैं, तो वो एक बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट पोर्शन है। तो जब आप फिर नेक्स्ट रीडिंग करेंगे एनसीईआरटी की, प्रीवियस ईयर क्वेश्चन पेपर्स और टेस्ट देखने के बाद आपको अपने आप इंपॉर्टेंट एरियाज आइडेंटिफाई होने लगेंगे। तो मैं पर्सनली उनसे नोट्स नहीं बनाती थी, मैं बुक में ही हाईलाइट कर लेती थी 2 थिंग्स, जो एरियाज़ मुझे इंपॉर्टेंट लगते थे और जो एरियाज़ मुझे लगता था वॉलेटाइल है, नाम है मैं भूल जाती हूँ, डेटा फैक्ट्स है मैं भूल जाती हूँ, उनको मैं हाईलाइट कर लेती थी। और प्रीलिम से जो 1 मंथ पहले वाली मेरी रिवीजन होती थी, उसमें मैं वो सिर्फ हाईलाइटेड पोर्शन पढ़ती थी।
मैम ये करंट अफेयर को लेकर ना बहुत ऐसे इश्यूज चलते रहते हैं कि कैसे इसको ये किया, क्योंकि वो लंबा प्रोसेस है और इसमें न्यूज़पेपर से नोट्स बनाए या मंथली मैगजीन पे रीड करके उसको छोड़ें या फिर जो पीपी 365 आता है, क्योंकि तीनों में एक ही चीज़ है तो वो चीज़ नहीं आ रही है।
तो मैं पर्सनली ये करती थी कि मैं न्यूज़पेपर से कॉम्प्रिहेंसिवली नोट्स नहीं बनाती थी, मैं टारगेट रखती थी। जैसे मेरा ये होता था कि मैंने 45 मिनट्स में न्यूज़पेपर पढ़ना है और 1 घंटा डेली करंट अफेयर्स को देना है। तो वो 45 मिनट्स में मैं बहुत छोटी छोटी चीज़ें जो नोट कर पाती थी साथ साथ सिर्फ वही करती थी। जैसे अगर कोई बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट डेटा है, कोई ट्रेड की फिगर, कोई कमिटी, कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव नोट्स की कोई आर्टिकल के प्रोज एंड कॉन्स, सजेशंस, वो सब मैं न्यूज़पेपर से नहीं नोट करती थी। मैं रिलाई करती थी कि वो करंट अफेयर्स मैगज़ीन में कवर हो ही जाएगा। तो न्यूज़पेपर से मैं ऐसे सिर्फ 2 या 3 लाइंस बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट नोट करती थी। डेली करंट अफेयर्स को मैं थोड़ा ज़्यादा टाइम देती थी क्योंकि मैं मोस्टली उसी से नोट्स बनाती थी। तो जैसे मैं मेंस के टॉपिक्स अपने सामने स्टिक करके रखती थी। डेली करंट अफेयर्स में मान लीजिए 5 से 6 आर्टिकल्स आए हैं आज, तो मैं वो हर आर्टिकल रीड करते हुए उसको अपने मेंस के टॉपिक से रिलेट करके उसमें नोट्स बना लेती थी। तो स्टार्टिंग के 4-5 मंथ्स में ज़्यादा टाइम लग रहा था, बट एक बार आप 4-5 मंथ्स तक ऐसे नोट्स बना रहे हैं तो उसके बाद आपको टॉपिक्स रेपिटेटिव लगने लगेंगे। जैसे इंडिया जापान, इंडिया यूएसए, इंडिया अफ्रीका, 4-5 मंथ्स में एटलीस्ट 3 to 4 टाइम्स न्यूज़पेपर्स में, डेली करंट अफेयर्स में आ चुका होगा, आपने वो नोट कर लिया होगा। तो जब नेक्स्ट टाइम आप पढ़ेंगे आपको पूरा नहीं नोट करना पड़ेगा, सिर्फ शायद एक एक्स्ट्रा चीज़ होगी उसमें से जो आपको अच्छी लगेगी और आप नोट करेंगे। तो आई थिंक इनिशियल 3-4 मंथ्स जब आप नोट्स स्टार्ट कर रहे हैं तब ज़्यादा टाइम लगेगा, पर फिर बाद में कुछ कुछ पॉइंट्स ही ऐड करने होंगे तो वो प्रोसेस ज़्यादा फास्ट होने लगेगी।
Then in coaching teachers dictate some notes. So should you revise all those dictated notes, handwritten notes, or should you directly Lakshmikant Hospital?
आई यूज़ टू चूज़ कि मैं कौन से कोचिंग नोट्स पढ़ना चाहती हूँ। जैसे पॉलिटी के लिए मैंने लक्ष्मीकांत जब पढ़ ली थी एक बार, उसके बाद मैंने अपनी कोचिंग नोट से स्कैन थ्रू करके देखा कि कौन से टॉपिक्स हैं जो लक्ष्मीकांत में नहीं है या इसमें एक्स्ट्रा हैं। प्रीलिम्स पर्सपेक्टिव से शायद सब कवर्ड होता है, कुछ करंट चीज़ें मेंस पर्सपेक्टिव से रह जाती हैं। जैसे इस बार कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल मोरालिटी का क्वेश्चन आया था, क्योंकि लक्ष्मीकांत स्टैटिक है तो उसमें शायद वो कॉम्प्रिहेंसिवली कवर्ड नहीं होगा, पर आपके कोचिंग नोट्स में होगा। तो आई थिंक लक्ष्मीकांत पढ़ने के बाद आप एक बार नोट्स से देख लें, जो इंपॉर्टेंट चीज़ें रह गई हैं वो कवर कर लें, तो वो बहुत जल्दी कवर हो जाएगा। और इसके अलावा कुछ फ्रेंच टॉपिक्स थे, जैसे इंटरनेशनल रिलेशंस, गवर्नेंस, इन सब टॉपिक्स के लिए अगर कोचिंग नोट्स में कुछ वैल्यू एडिशन लगता था, क्योंकि मैंने बुक्स नहीं पढ़ी थी इन टॉपिक्स के लिए, वो नोट करती थी। और वर्ल्ड हिस्ट्री जैसे एक टॉपिक है, उसकी बुक बहुत कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव है, तो उसके लिए मैंने विजन का PDF होता है अराउंड 200 पेजेस का, वो रीड करके उसमें इंपॉर्टेंट चीज़ें हाईलाइट कर ली थी। तो मैं ऐसे बहुत सेलेक्टिवली कोचिंग नोट्स पढ़ती थी कि मुझे क्या चीज़ है जो बुक पढ़ने के बाद रह गई है या कवर नहीं हो पाई है, उसके लिए मैं नोट्स पे रिलाई करती थी।
Some toppers say that the spectrum is only factual, it will not help in your brains. So, have you read Big Chandra or only
No.
rely on spectrum?
No, I only read Spectrum for modern history and I was able to answer most questions for modern history from Spectrum. Yes, but it is just that when you read Spectrum, you should be able to think from the perspective of mains. For example, every year there will be some question on moderates, on extremists, on their strategy, some religious reform movements, the role of these movements around the Gandhian phase. So when you read Spectrum 3 to 4 times and you go through the previous year's question papers, you should then start making causal linkages the next time you read Spectrum. So जब आप गांधीयन फेज पढ़ रहे हैं, आप उसमें मेंस पर्सपेक्टिव से सोचें कि अगर मुझे इस फेज से कोई भी क्वेश्चन निकल के आता है, मुझे कुछ इंपॉर्टेंट इवेंट्स याद रखने हैं, सॉल्ट मार्च याद रखना है, 1907 वाली मूवमेंट में कुछ 3-4 इम्पॉर्टेंट फोरम्स बने थे, इम्पॉर्टेंट स्टेप्स जो लिए गए थे, तो ऐसे हर फेज से कुछ कुछ इम्पॉर्टेंट स्टेप्स आप याद रखेंगे अगर, तो आई थिंक स्पेक्ट्रम से इजीली कवर हो जाता है मेंस का पोर्शन भी।
किसी भी बुक को जैसे स्पेक्ट्रम है या लक्ष्मीकांत है, तो उसको पढ़ते हैं जब, तो उसको रिवाइज मतलब एग्ज़ाम से पहले इतना सारा तो उसको आपने कैसे किया था?
हाँ, तो इसके लिए दो चीज़ें होती हैं। सबसे पहले तो आप जैसे जैसे रिविज़न नंबर ऑफ़ टाइम्स आप रिवाइज़ करते हो, उतना टाइम आपका कम लगने लगता है। जैसे जब मैंने लक्ष्मीकांत फर्स्ट टाइम रीड करी थी, तो मुझे 1 महीना लगा था, पर आफ्टर 6 to 7 रिविजन लक्ष्मीकांत में 3 to 4 डेज़ में रीड कर पाती हूँ। तो एक तो है आपकी रीडिंग स्पीड बढ़ जाती है, दूसरा आप एग्ज़ाम से पहले सिलेक्टिवली पढ़ें। जैसे अगर आप प्रीलिम्स से पहले पढ़ रहे हैं, तो लक्ष्मीकांत के जो वॉलेटाइल पोर्शंस है, जो एंड में सारी कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल नॉन कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल बॉडीज़ हैं, उनकी रिटायरमेंट एज, उनके टेन्योर, जो वॉलेटाइल पोर्शन है जो भूल जाते हैं, उस पे ज़्यादा फोकस करें। तो ऐसे सब्सिक्वेंट रिविजन्स दिए करे हैं, टेस्ट दिए हैं, उसके बाद आप आइडेंटिफाई कर पाओगे कि क्या चीज़ें भूल जाती हैं। तो एग्ज़ाम से पहले मैं वो हाईलाइटेड पोर्शन ही पढ़ती थी। सिमिलरली मेंस के लिए वो स्ट्रैटेजी डिफरेंट थी। जैसे मेंस के लिए अगर मैं नितिन सिंघानिया देख रही हूँ एग्ज़ाम से पहले, तो मैं बहुत सेलेक्टिवली सिर्फ 2-3 टेम्पल्स के नाम देख लूँगी, क्योंकि जो एनालिसिस है उस आर्किटेक्चर में क्या क्या हुआ था वो याद रह जाता है 3 महीने पहले पढ़ा हुआ भी, बट नाम भूल जाते हैं। सिमिलरली ज्योग्राफी में डेटा भूल जाता है। तो ऐसे में जो पोर्शन एकदम एग्ज़ाम के पहले रिकॉल करना इम्पोर्टेंट होता था, वो मैं हाईलाइट करके रखती थी और एग्ज़ाम से पिछले मंथ वाली रिवीजन में उस पे ज़्यादा फोकस करती थी।
I will second year of Delhi University. I am going to do attempt in 2024 after 2 years. And I have joined both coaching, optional and GS. So it will help. It will go end in month of February 23. So after that I will have 1 year. So how should I plan this time?
आई थिंक जो मैं अपनी गलतियों से आपको बता सकती हूँ कि मेरी फ़र्स्ट अटैम्प्ट में ये गलती थी, मैंने प्रीलिम्स बिना ऑप्शनल प्रिपेयर किए दिया था। तो ऑप्शनल जब तक प्रिपेयर्ड नहीं है, आपका मेंस प्रीलिम से मेंस के बीच के टाइम में ऑप्शनल और जीएस बैलेंस कर पाना बहुत डिफ़िकल्ट हो जाएगा। तो आई थिंक आपको इनिशियल अभी 3-4 मंथ्स में अपना ऑप्शनल का रिविज़न एंड टू एंड पूरा कर लेना चाहिए। आप नवंबर-दिसंबर के अराउंड जीएस पे शिफ्ट हो जाएं, तो फरवरी के बाद कोचिंग ख़त्म हो जाएगी, टाइम भी एक्स्ट्रा होगा। उस टाइम पे आप स्टैटिक और करंट अफेयर्स दोनों को एक साथ लेके चलें और ऑप्शनल फरवरी-मार्च तक थोड़ा थोड़ा दिन में 2-3 घंटे रिवाइज़ करते रहें, एक बार पहले कंप्लीट करके। तो ऐसे आप फेजेस में डिवाइड करके करोगे तो टाइम भी बैलेंस हो जाएगा, और प्रीलिम्स से पहले आप क्योंकि जीएस पढ़ रहे होगे तो वो भी आपके लिए हेल्पफुल हो जाएगा। ऑप्शनल पहले कवर करने से आप प्रीलिम्स के पहले ऑप्शनल नहीं टच करके जीएस को ज़्यादा टाइम दे पाओगे।
Which is best strategy to prepare optional and GS simultaneously or separately? Means 4 months for optional, 4 months for GS, or
I think that if you're able to prepare your optional for the first 4 months, so give around 2 hours to current affairs every day. Other than that, prepare your optional entirely the first 4 months. Then move to GS and give 2 hours to optional every day. So this way, if you do not complete your optional right now, you will have to take it till March or April before prelims, and then आप prelims के डर में शायद optional को time ना दे पाएँ। तो अभी एक बार ऑप्शनल पूरा कवर करके जीएस को कम टाइम देके बाद में ऑप्शनल को कम और जीएस को ज़्यादा दे सकते हैं, सो दैट प्रीलिम्स बैलेंस हो जाए।
For geography, you will have only one NCERT job or have you read GC job?
I had read GC Leong during my first attempt. After that, I did not read GC Leong because I realized कि GC Leong से questions आ नहीं रहे हैं ज़्यादा और वो time consuming भी है, तो वो देखते हुए और मैथ्स को साथ में बैलेंस करने के लिए मैंने NCERTs पे ही रिलाई किया। बट GC Leong फर्स्ट 2-3 बार रीड करी थी फर्स्ट अटैम्प्ट के टाइम पे, तो उससे कुछ कुछ चीज़ें काम आ जाती थी, बट अब वो स्किप कर सकते हैं। आई थिंक NCERT सफिशेंट है। इंटरव्यू का एक्सपीरियंस मेरा प्लेजेंट था। तो इंटरव्यू प्रेपरेशन के लिए मेरा यही था कि डाफ जो था उसके सारे कीवर्ड्स मैंने प्रिपेयर किए थे। जैसे होम स्टेट है तो मेरी स्टेट में इकोनॉमी की क्या कंडीशन है, गवर्नमेंट किन पॉलिसीज़ पे फोकस कर रही है, टूरिस्ट प्लेसेस क्या हैं, एक्सेट्रा। तो जो प्रीवियस ईयर्स इंटरव्यू ट्रांसक्रिप्ट रीड करके हम देख सकते हैं कि हमारी हॉबीज़ जो हैं, हमारी होम स्टेट है, उस पर किस तरह के क्वेश्चंस पूछे गए थे, उन पे रीड करते हुए, बाकी लोगों के साथ डिस्कस करते हुए, मॉक इंटरव्यूज़ देते हुए, ये कंटिन्यूस प्रोसेस के थ्रू मैं कंटेंट में वैल्यू एडिशन कर पा रही थी और स्पीकिंग स्किल्स इम्प्रूव कर पा रही थी। तो ये ही था इंटरव्यू प्रेपरेशन। इंटरव्यू में नहीं, वो कुछ लोगों को पूछते हैं कि आपका ये 4th अटैम्प्ट है, आपने इससे पहले क्या किया, इतना टाइम क्यों लगा, बट आई थिंक वो सिर्फ प्रेशर क्रिएट करने के लिए होता है, टू जज कि आप प्रेशर में कैसे रिस्पॉन्ड करते हैं या क्या आप कॉन्फिडेंटली जस्टिफाई कर पाते हैं। आई डोंट थिंक उसका कोई भी नेगेटिव इम्पैक्ट होता है।